This is Aaron Channel with the California Convictions live stream. I haven't done a live in a couple of days, so I thought that I'd hop on and, well, honestly, talk about anything people might want to talk about. My subject of choice for the evening is the criminogenic factor of California prisons whenever I was locked up. Criminogenic is an important word. It relates to an environment or a set of circumstances that literally cause crime. Of course, free will is a thing. It's not like anybody went to California prisons and was pinned down and forced to become a criminal. But it is a thing that if you put 100 people into an environment, in some environments they're more likely to get a good education, college for instance. In other environments, they're likely to get an education of a different type. Prison, for instance. This was determined not by the inmates or even the guards, but rather by the United States Supreme Court, that California prisons had a criminogenic influence on the people in them. To the point that it actually qualified. It was one of the reasons that the California system was put into receivership. It was cruel and unusual punishment that the gangs were being allowed to run California prisons to the point they were. I got a little note that popped up on my screen letting me know that I'm buffering. So if the audio or video quality is of particularly poor nature, go ahead and shout out. But short of that, I think I'll just continue talking about, well, California prisons and their criminogenic effect. Gina Lister and Vegas Prison Stories both hop on to say hello. Thanks, Gina. The United States Supreme Court came down on California pretty hard regarding the criminogenic effect of its prisons. It was one of the reasons that they were forced to let so many inmates go. Letting inmates out of prison, that is not a decision that any administration comes at lightly. They released tens of thousands of inmates, and the logic was that if they have to be released, the state would rather be in control of who was released. Because the court had said that the prison overcrowding in California was so severe, they were going to release somebody, and if California didn't want the court to just pick names out of a hat, they would best come to a decision themselves. Arthur D. noted that I hadn't been on for a little while, and it's true. I took a week off, a little bit more, took care of the family. But, a little bit of luck, you'll see more of me. Or what I mean to do is to start being consistent about that live stream time that I'm supposed to be on weekly, and as it turns out, I only show up about 2 weeks out of 3, that 5 p.m. on Tuesdays, Pacific Standard Time. One of the most interesting things about serving time in a system where you have to be a criminal to some degree. Nobody gets off the bus at San Quentin or High Desert or Chino or wherever they do time and goes to the shot caller and tells them, hey, I'm not going to be involved in anything, and if I see you guys committing any kind of wrongdoing, I'm going to go tell the cops. It's a suicide mission is what that is. If you're a criminal, you have to some degree, be a convict. Whoa! $10 from Arthur D. Very cool. You have to some degree, be a convict. You have to be willing to keep your mouth shut, your head down, not stick your nose in other people's business. It's a normal thing that you might be walking on the yard, you might have somebody walk up to you and just, hey, you're in 3 block, right? Your job is to say, yeah, brother, what do you need? And he needs something small. He needs you to go take this hot kite into the building. Or he needs you to go in and tell Frank the drugs hit the yard. He needs to get out here. It's little things. This isn't real criminality. It's not like just because you're walking on the yard, you're going to have to go get a piece and hit somebody. But you do absolutely have to be comfortable with a certain degree of guys taking care of the business of being a convict, being a criminal. Gina asks if my live stream crashed for anybody. I have a little yellow dot that popped up right after I started saying that my connection was poor. I'm going to guess solar storms, but this is going to be the year for solar storms. But whatever it is, my connection may not be as good as it usually is. I'll go ahead and do the video regardless, and I'll talk here for about a half hour, and I'm just going to hope it's of high enough quality that everybody can enjoy it. Or at least that YouTube manages to record it and save it for me so it's there for anybody tomorrow. Rudy Castro asks how I'm doing, and honestly, I'm doing just wonderfully. My kids brought home a cold, so I had a bit of a scratchy throat for a couple of days, but today's a good day. And it's something that I try and remind myself after, 17 years I did. 16 and change, I suppose. Days that feel bad, days where you wake up and maybe you have a headache or you exercise too much so your body hurts, whatever it is. Those are the days you can have the best day, because those are the days you really earn it. And I learned that in prison. Whenever something goes wrong, they searched so you lost some of your goodies, or there's a lockdown and you're not going to be allowed to leave the cell, look at it as an opportunity. And if you approach life with that perspective, that ridiculous, Pollyannish, optimistic, well, there's nothing that can go wrong today. It's going to be a good day, by golly. Even though that's an obvious lie. They aren't all good days. You can take a day that would have been a bad day, something that haunted you, and turn it into an okay day. Maybe an okay day into a great day. Ugh. I have a number of people noting that the live apparently is crashing and coming back, and that is unfortunate. I think it's on YouTube rather than me, but whatever it is, I don't think I can fix it at this moment. Thank you for going to the effort of logging out and logging back in or reloading or whatever the solution is. I talked a lot whenever I was incarcerated, too. The day-to-day dynamics of what it is to do time can be difficult for a civilian to understand. But one thing you have a lot of, not surprisingly, is time. They give you your whole day. They open the door up at like 9 in the morning and they close it at like 8 in the evening. And sure, there's other stuff you need to do. You might have a little job you do. You might have to go to medical. But by and large, over the course of a day, you really just hang out, as strange as that is. One thing I like to do was walk laps around the big concrete yard, a nice slow walking pace, 2 miles an hour, with somebody whose company I could tolerate, frankly. Somebody who wasn't too much of a creep or a weirdo, wasn't too in the gang politics, and was bright enough that he and I could enjoy each other's company. And I'd walk and talk or listen while the other guy talked for 2, 3, 4 hours at a time. It's an interesting experience having that amount of free time, and it's not free because you're locked up, but free time. Gina Lester asks, in a high desert, how much of your day is in your actual cell? And that's an intelligent question. It depends on if you're in lockdown or not. A lockdown means that there is some security issue that is requiring either you specifically or perhaps a larger group of inmates. All the inmates in your gang, all the inmates that share your ethnicity, all the inmates in your building. Whatever it is, the group of inmates are not allowed to come out of their cell. In that circumstance, and these lockdowns can last for months and months. The longest I spent on lockdown was about 7 months, and then we were off lockdown for 2 weeks, and then we went back on lockdown for 4 more months. A lockdown, you don't come out of your cell for anything, unless you happen to have a job that requires, for instance, you're a kitchen worker, so they put you in handcuffs and take you to the kitchen and take you out of handcuffs because you're where you're supposed to work and make food for everybody. Unless you have a position like that, you leave the cell 3 times a week for between 10 and 15 minutes at a time. That's for a shower. They put you in handcuffs, they take you and your cellie, and they put you guys into a shower, and then they take you out 10, 15 minutes later. If you're not on lockdown, it's far more generous as far as time outside of the cell goes. Generally, you'll get out of your cell for breakfast and dinner, and that's just walk to the chow hall, sit down with 3 other dudes, and eat your meal. But it's an important part of the day because a lot of business or socializing or whatever it is gets conducted in the chow hall. It's something where most every day you know you're going to see the other guys. Excuse me. My throat's a little scratchy. Of course, after you count for breakfast and dinner, the rest of the day is honestly an inmate's, if he doesn't have a job. The door opens at about 9 in the morning, and they'll give you the opportunity to go out to a day room, which is where other inmates are inside of a building, taking showers, using the communal phones. Or to go out to the yard, which is where they have things like recreational activities, sport games, a big field to walk around on, stuff like that. And you can stay out there just about all day long, from 9 a.m. until 4 p.m. The only exception is guys who are on some kind of high security thing, close A custody, which means that you have to come in at noon and be counted. They just make sure you're still in prison and you didn't escape. So over the course of a day, an inmate can actually spend 8, 9, even 10 hours outside of his cell on a level 4 yard like I was on at High Desert, socializing with other inmates. It makes for a lot of free time. Of course, some guys have jobs. I like to get a clerk job, and that'd keep you busy. You can spend 10 hours a day at your job if you particularly want to. And often there's a side hustle attached to it, a couple of bucks here or there. Additionally, I was speaking about the criminogenic effect of California prisons in the early 2000s. And it's something I gave a lot of thought to because it's an interesting idea. You imagine sending somebody to college. They don't really have the intent to get a degree, they don't care, but for whatever reason the state is paying for them to attend classes and be at the campus. You take it for granted that person's probably going to get a little bit smarter, even if they're a true screw-up and they're just looking at it as a free vacation the state is paying for. Well, some guys, most guys, they're going to get a little smarter just from being around all of the other students. Prison is no different. You go ahead and take somebody who isn't a criminal, who has no intent of becoming a criminal. They went to prison for some stupid mistake they made, and they're going to be there a while. But they don't want to get involved in the politics. They want to do their time and go home. Their 5 years, let's say. If you end up on a serious yard, you don't have the option of just doing your 5 years. They're going to hit you up whenever you land. Hey, what's your name? Where are you from? What are you about? Mandatory yard, mandatory workout. You make sure you're ready when it kicks off. This isn't even a negative thing. They're not doing it with malfeasance. The idea isn't to trick the guy into becoming a gang member and part of a criminal lifestyle. It's that in a California prison, if you have no criminal sophistication, if you're incapable of differentiating between whenever it's okay to talk to a cop and when it isn't, of whether somebody is coming up on you in an aggressive way with that piece they got cupped in their right hand, you're not going to survive prison. To some degree, the criminogenic effect is a survival effect. You're an idiot if you go to prison and you don't learn anything about how to get away with things. Because somebody's watching you all the time, and there are a lot of rules. Hell, there's one rule that if Frank comes over and gives you a knife, goes, here, quick, hide this, you better. And there's a whole nother rule that says you better not. And you need to know what rule you're supposed to follow at what time. If 6 cops are watching Frank walk over with a knife trying to hand it off to you all subtle-like, it's probably a good time to pretend like you don't know Frank. Conversely, if he's booking it away from a nasty incident and trying to hide something, it's a good time to have that criminal sophistication. Tell him, here, brother, I got you. Take that and slide it under a door or something. The Supreme Court, in the Armstrong decision, and this is such a long court case, so we don't need to recap the whole thing, but they decided that California prisons were overcrowded. And had been for like 30 years, where they kept saying, you guys need to have fewer inmates in California prisons. You can build more prisons if you want, that solves the problem, but the ratio of inmates to cells is way too high. You can't have more inmates than cells. It's not a good plan. California put them off again and again until finally a lot of things, the medical treatment, the criminogenic effect of prison overcrowding, and the inherent human rights violations that you're going to see whenever you're trying to fit 200,000 inmates into a system designed for 100,000 inmates. Eventually it hit a head. And the court did get involved, and they ordered the release of tens of thousands of inmates, partially because of that criminogenic influence. We don't want those guys in California prisons because you're making criminals. We're sending you some, not all, but some decent, hardworking citizens who should be getting out rehabilitated. And the system that CDC has set up is turning them into criminals. That was the court's logic. It's why a lot of inmates were released, and it's the interesting paradox and the idea of criminogenic prisons that make criminals in the same way that a bad apple barrel makes bad apples. Oh, hey, folks. Glad to have you on. I am happy to be doing another live stream. I was absent for a week or two, like I said, and throat's just a little scratchy. I managed to do a small interview with Paradigm Media a couple of weeks ago. I came on one of their lives, and I really enjoyed the opportunity to speak to a new and hopefully broader audience. I wanted to take the time, we got the 3 minutes here or whatever it is, to specifically thank anybody who bothered to show up for my first live stream. For as long as you guys keep listening to whatever I have to say, I'll keep talking. I'm speaking primarily about the idea of criminogenic prisons. And I just love that word. As soon as I went to county jail, there was no question about the idea that being surrounded by other inmates in a jail or a prison required you to have some degree of criminality. If you wanted to be the guy who sat up on his bunk and went, "Now, fellas, don't smoke that cigarette, we could get in trouble." Well, there's 5 dudes in the room, and you're the one going, "No, guys, don't do it." All you're ensuring is that you've alienated yourself completely. You can volunteer to be the lookout. You can even say, "Hey, guys, I'm going to go that way because I don't want to be around this." And they'll think it's a strange choice. But even just electing to remove yourself from the rule-breaking, whatever it is, whether they're smoking a cigarette or stabbing a dude to death, just the fact that you decided to walk away really paints a target and a red flag on your back. Because eventually there's going to be an investigation. Eventually somebody in the pod is going to be a rat. Immediately, the guy who doesn't like to be around crime and criminality, they're going to assume it's him. It often isn't. Criminal sophistication is just that. If you are a criminal, you like to get away with things. Well, the time that you figured out that if you just kept a little log of the stuff you saw other people get away with and then traded that piece of paper, that information, to get out of something little yourself, you became a rat. And there are a lot of rats just blending in on the active yards, anywhere where crimes happen. I recall John Gotti. He told his son, John Jr., whenever he was getting involved in crime and criminality, he had his little gaggle of hoodlums. John Sr., who of course has about as much criminal sophistication as you can imagine, told him, "You know what you need to do? Go borrow a car from somebody, get yourself a pair of men's boots and about 100 pounds of potatoes. Roll those potatoes up in a carpet and stick the boots out the end. You roll up on your friends and say, 'Hey guys, I need help.' You let them look in the trunk and see who goes running to the cops and who gets in the passenger seat to help you out." Again, John Sr. had about as much criminal sophistication as you can have, but he was right in his core inference that if you have a group of 10 guys who are all down for the cause and love you, brother, and you're parts of the same gang, it's just guaranteed 1 or 2, they're lying, and what they're actually doing is they're waiting for an opportunity to take advantage, either of a situation or your mistake. If you are by the books, don't want to get in trouble, just follow the rules, everything will be okay kind of guy, prison is a bad place to go because you are going to get blamed for the snitching, the ratting, the whatever happens just for being that type of guy. Doesn't matter if you did it or not, you're suspect. The same way if you got a bunch of drug addicts in an area and some drugs go missing, well, the first person I look at is the drug addict. Well, If we got a bunch of potential rats in an area and somebody's ratting, I look for the rattiest rat I can find, right? Vegas prison stories suggest that I should join the live streams on Gunner's Profile and the Rojo Room. I'm impressed at the quality of content that they put out. I may be reaching out to them in the near future, actually. Thank you for the advice. And Gina Lester says that she watches a video of mine every day. Well, I've been doing this long enough that it'll take you a couple of months to get through the entire video collection. Though, if I'm being frank, the audio and video quality of the first couple months' worth of content was very low. I still like the stories, some of them are great, but I didn't have the decent microphone yet. Vegas prison stories have been doing snippets on Wes Watson recently, and they've been interesting and entertaining. Wes Watson is a bit of a celebrity in the subject of, prison content. I don't speak about him much because, for myself, I personally benefited from him yelling at the camera that people should get up off their butt and try harder. It's what I needed to hear, apparently, and I consider his advice to have been instrumental, though not as important as my wife's, in starting this channel. That said, the man has made a couple of statements and affirmations about doing time in California prison, which ring false to a large percentage of his audience. California prison is a rough place to do time, but I think that something people don't understand is that there are a lot of different, I call them neighborhoods, environments, yards, prisons, whatever you want to call them, in CDC. You can start just by talking about what kind of security you were on. If you were on a level 4, 180 yard, that's the term, level 4, 180, you did real time. You saw the convicts and the killers training to murder each other right there on that concrete. I was blessed. I avoided the level 4 180 and went one security lower to the level 4 270. Those yards are serious, but they're also relatively laid back. They are not the same as a 180 yard. Ghost Rider, I lost the name for a second, suggests that high security inmates should be single cell. And it was that way for a long, long time. And whenever prison got a little bit overcrowded, that's whenever we started really seeing an uptick in gang and prison violence. It's not just whether you have one cell or two, it also has to do with how many people are in a dorm, how the institutional architecture is important. That said, the easiest, simplest, quickest fix to reduce prison violence would be to put one person in a cell instead of two. That's the smartest advice I can hear from anybody, and Ghost Rider's 100% about it. Finally, I wanted to speak about the end result of a criminogenic environment. Because, again, CDC was determined to be criminogenic, meaning that people go there, they become criminals. CDC, California Department of Corrections. This wasn't a random determination. This was the court, and it was well thought out with a lot of evidence. But they sent so many people to prison in California, from the early 90s until the late 2010s, that general time period, who were eventually released or who are just now getting out. Those people went through a criminogenic system. We've established, determined, and accepted they are more likely to commit crime after having been there. It was criminal college. And that is the end result of a lock them up and throw away the key type of attitude like California was trying out. If you actually throw away the key, meaning you leave all those people in there until the day they die, well, maybe we don't have to care if it's criminogenic, if you send innocent men in and come out with criminals. On the other hand, that's not what we did. We said we were going to throw away the key, and 20 years later we started letting people out. En masse, we have released an incredible number of inmates in the past decade. given that they are paroling to our communities. These are our neighbors, our friends, the person giving us a burger at McDonald's. These are the parolees that got locked up and endured that criminogenic environment. I sincerely wish that more attention had been paid at the time to what kind of crimes we were teaching those men to commit while they were locked up. Okay. I wanted to thank everybody for showing up. This was about a half hour of my talking about whatever came to my mind around the idea of criminogenic environments in California prisons. I expect I'll be doing another live later in the week, and that I'll be a little bit more consistent in these. But regardless, again, thank you for watching.